Hi, Ronald Rules Lawyer, and I'm going to give a quick overview of the Monster Core book that's coming out late March for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We're going to look at some rules changes I found, compare some artwork from the old version and the new, and spotlight a couple monsters. Monster Core is part of the new edition of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I call it version 2.1, where the Paizo has republished their core books as Player Core, GM Core, and now Monster Core, to be followed by Player Core 2 this summer. The immediate reason for this incremental edition was Wizards of the Coast at the beginning of 2023 demonstrating that other publishers could not rely on the open gaming license to base their business off of. Monster Core is the third rulebook published under the ORC license, which stands for the Open RPG Creative License, designed to allow creators to publish and share their rules among each other. Introducing myself really quick, I'm Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'm a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. I have been doing so for 14 years. I ran an after-school middle school class. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. If you haven't yet, support my Patreon. I don't make money as a lawyer. For more info on that, look up the video whose thumbnail is on the screen. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to many of my videos and exclusive content. On January 24th, Paizo published this blog on their website explaining the design goals, gasp, for their Monster Core book. First, they want to match the remaster rules, publish many of their classic monsters, but under the rules established by the Player Core and GM Core books. They wanted to collect the greatest hits. If you ask me, Monster Core is kind of like Bestiary 1 remixed. It hews to the classic monsters that Bestiary 1 published, but it includes more monsters that come from Bestiary 2 and 3 that I would say are have a little more personality and also are a little weirder, including one of my favorite monsters, the Tooth Fairy. You see more of that weirdness here in Monster Core as a whole. They wanted to replace some OGL monsters, some monsters that are associated with the Hasbro IP they did not want to include. Also, they changed a bunch of names to move away from that IP. They wanted to match the mythology. A lot of the monsters that had been in the bestiary before were based on pop culture ideas of monsters in myth or based in folk tales. And with Monster Core, they wanted to reimagine monsters so that they were closer to their original ideas. They also say pack it full. They have actually about 15 pages more in this book than in the bestiary. They made an effort to fit in more monsters. Also, there was this interesting note. They said there were some changes that were not primary goals. Low-level monsters had high AC too often, and Michael Sayer did a pass to make the low-level experience more even. And so apparently they were mindful of making the game easier for new players. I haven't had time, and I will not have time to do a thorough side-by-side comparison of every stat block. But I did notice that the Goblin Warrior's attack bonus has gone down from +8 to +7. Another thing that's new is that near the beginning of the book is a box of content warnings. It indicates which monsters might evoke certain disturbing themes, something that many tables will appreciate. So first, let's do a lightning tour and look at some of the artwork changes that jumped out to me in the book. Leshies are favorite plant creatures. When Pathfinder 2e was published in 2019, Leshies were these somewhat frightening, yet to some people cute, the way I think people find pugs cute, creatures. However, over time, the designers have seemed to soften a bit in their portrayal of various creatures, and they seem to have fully embraced the cute. Look at the cactus Leshie for reference, but here is the new version of the leaf Leshie. Aww. And here's the fungus Leshie. These are the new imaginings of the Leshies in the Monster Core. Next are Mephids, our low-level elemental monsters. They have been renamed to Scamps, which is a cute name. This is what they looked like before. They look like impish, naked men with wings. Well, now they're cute little bugs with big eyes, with big faces. And aren't they cute? As you can see, cuteness has been turned up in this bestiary. However, we're going to see some classic monsterish stylings soon. Next are Barghests, which were written in the lore in the bestiary as related to goblins and worshipped by goblins. This is what they looked like before. As you can see, they looked like a monstrosity version of goblins with 4 legs. However, they have now been reimagined as dogs. Dogs with an unholy tag. Their origins are deliberately unclear, and it simply describes them as lurking near settlements to hunt. Its change shape ability allows it to assume the form of a dog, a normal-looking dog, or a humanoid. Before, it had to be a goblinoid like a bugbear or a goblin. So they are now a more versatile monster for our use. Next is our basilisk, our monster that can turn you to stone with its gaze. Well, here it is in the bestiary. It is a many-legged creature. However, the new updated version is a snake-like creature. And I assume this is one of the examples of them going closer to the source material this time around. Next, we have the Guardian Naga. They went from a face on a snake's body to something more snake-like in this case. This is the normally good-aligned Naga of the two that are in the bestiary. Their description in the book retains their good nature. Next is the homunculus, our crafted creature that serves as someone's servant. Well, they go from flying creatures that look like imp devils to this in the monster core. Now this next one is just funny. Our purple worm from D&D, they figured they would drop that in order to get away from the OGL. They've renamed it the cave worm, and the artwork of the purple worm has just had a color filter. It's just had its color changed so that it's no longer purple. We have new artwork for the sea hag. The new version is much more strange looking and has tentacles like an octopus. Now on to some rules changes. The big one is that alignment has been removed from all monsters. Alignment does not exist in Pathfinder 2e with the remaster. So no more having to define whether something is good or evil or lawful or chaotic. What remains are the holy and unholy traits. They are given to a relatively small number of creatures, unlike alignment, which every creature had to have one previous to the remaster. And by and large, they seem to be limited to certain kinds of creatures. Holy seems to be limited to celestials, and unholy seems to be limited to fiends, undead, and a few other creatures, like the Rune Giant. Oh, and the Barghest. Now, I think I was under a misconception before this book came out that alignment would be replaced for monsters with edicts and anathema, but I think I was mistaken. The only time edicts and anathema come up in this book are the few times that religions are mentioned and the edicts and anathema of their worshippers. A lot of the evil and good creatures from before still retain their description in their flavor text. They just lop off alignment, but there are cases for some of the monsters where they make them more morally gray, and here's one example. The gnolls are changed from being bloodthirsty gluttons and slavers who worship demons and other reprehensible powers, who also eat all kinds of flesh, to, well, they still eat flesh, but they're much more nuanced now. It emphasizes their pack tactics, their ability to hunt in groups, and the deep respect and love they have among their brethren in contrast to outsiders, while still being amoral. But compared to before, where they were chaotic evil with a big neon sign and had that evil description, they are now much more nuanced. I was also curious as to what can be affected by spirit damage. What are creatures that don't have a spirit that can be affected? Well, the undead creatures I saw can be affected by spirit damage, but not constructs, which is consistent with what their preview said. Here's the animated statue. Their list of immunities is the same, but with spirit, vitality, and void damage being additional immunities. Another change that I caught was the elite and weak adjustments have been changed in the monster core, whereas before, if you applied the elite changes to the statistics, you increase the creature's level by 1. However, if it is a low-level creature, level -1 or 0, you increase its level by 2. And I think this deals with the fact that adding 10 hit points to such a low-level creature actually has a very big effect on their relative strength. And also, when you look at the monster creation charts, their AC and attack bonuses are pretty flat between level -1 and level 1. Similarly, applying the weak adjustment when the base creature is level 1, you want to lower it down straight to level -1. Next is something that is not news to people who've been following the remaster project closely, but the grab special ability and the knockdown ability for monsters has been changed. The special ability to automatically grab a foe if you just struck them that turn has now been replaced by a grapple check. However, it is free from the multiple attack penalty and does not contribute to it. This means that those player characters who have bonuses against grapple can enjoy those benefits. But it also means for creatures that are particularly good at grappling, they are buffed because they have a fair chance now to critically succeed to restrain a creature, at least not without sustaining the multiple attack penalty. And restraining a creature is very strong. The knockdown ability is more of a straight nerf because critically succeeding on a trip only inflicts 1d6 bludgeoning damage. But yes, this also requires an actual check instead of automatically succeeding, and it's separate from the multiple attack penalty. Similarly, push no longer automatically has the effect of shove, but now requires a shove check. And there's now a new ability called pull that keys off of the new reposition skill action in the remaster. These also do not affect and are not affected by the multiple attack penalty. Next, let's look at changes to monsters, and I make no claim that this is a comprehensive review of changes to the monsters. First, a lot of names were changed in order to get away from Hasbro's IP with Dungeons & Dragons, and also some classic monsters associated with D&D do not exist in the Monster Core, and here is the Intellect Devourer and the Owlbear. They make no appearance here. Basically, if you see something in the D&D movie, it was probably placed there to promote the Hasbro IP and is not going to appear in the Monster Core. Heaven forbid that Paizo would violate Wizards of the Coast copyright rights. Let's talk about Archons. Archons are angel-like creatures. It's telling that I have to refer to angels in order to describe Archons because they're kind of similar to each other in the bestiary. Angels were neutrally aligned and inhabited Nirvana, and they look like people with wings. And Archons inhabit the lawful good plane of heaven and often look like people with wings. However, the creators wanted to, again, move away from pop culture conceptions of these creatures and go back towards the original source material. And on the screen are some pictures of what angels actually look like if you take their descriptions from the Christian Bible. Well, the designers and Paizo decided to make their Archons similarly freaky and weird. So on the left, we have the Hound Archon in the bestiary. Here in the Monster Core, they look like this. They have several hound heads. They also wield a bow rather than a sword, which is interesting. Someone who knows more about the mythology could educate us in the comments. Next are the Legion Archon. This is what they look like in the bestiary. They are diplomats of peace. Again, look like people with wings. But this is what they look like in the Monster Core. Their face is not a face. It's a ring of fire with eyes in it. Freaky deaky, and one that seems to evoke both fear and awe. Next is the Cockatrice, and nothing terribly exciting here. I was just pleased to see that they've actually defined how long the slowed condition from their calcification ability lasts. It's only 1 minute. It was unclear before, it had no duration, and so every GM was left to their own devices. I'm happy it's now clear. Next is the Balor Demon, our level 20 Demon of Fire, which used to be the Balrog in the original version of D&D, became then the Balor Demon. Its place at the top of the hierarchy of demons in the core monster book has been replaced by the Vralakai Demon, which has been published by Paizo before. But I thought this was a significant lore change. The generals of the armies of demonkind are now Vralakai demons instead of Balor demons. Their abilities seem to be the same as before, except they've graduated up from level 19 to level 20 to fulfill their peak slot. Also, here's an example of an unholy creature's defenses. They have a weakness to holy damage, and interestingly, they can still be harmed by unholy damage. So they're still affected by the unholy damage, probably spirit damage from other demons and from spells. They're just more hurt by holy damage. Now let's talk about dragons, and Paizo has been very proud of their changes to dragons. Here's a picture of the Fortune Dragon. They are moving away from that dichotomy of good metallic dragons on the one hand and evil chromatic dragons. How dare they have colors? Instead, dragons are keyed to one of the 4 traditions of magic in Pathfinder, which are arcane, divine, primal, and occult. Our 2 divine dragon types are also divided between holy and unholy. Before, the dragons that were based on the old D&D lore, I would argue, were pretty not very unique from each other. The chromatic dragons of the different colors, red, black, blue, green, and white, were basically defined by their breath weapon. And overall, for all of the dragon types, you kind of had to read the text to figure out more about who they were. In contrast, I think these are much more distinctive. They're Fortune Dragon, Mirage, Imperial, the Holy One, Diabolic, Adamantine, Horned, well, that's a little plain, Conspirator, and Omen. This also seems to be part of moving away from the OGL, because the divide of good and evil between the two overall types of dragons is keyed to alignment. And dragons being associated specifically with those colors and those metals is, I think, distinctly D&D in overall dragon lore. I also include the level of the young version of each dragon type, and it tells you the relative strength of each dragon. Apparently, the diabolic dragons are the strongest. Their young dragons are level 11. And the weakest are the omen dragons at level 7. For each dragon, to get the adult version, add 4 levels. To get the ancient version, add 9 levels. For fun, we'll focus on one of these dragons, the young adamantine dragon. Primal dragons are described collectively as being more bestial, larger than their fellows, and more likely to act on instinct. We still have the ability to create spellcaster dragons, by the way, in the monster core. There's a sidebar for each dragon type on how you can run spellcasting versions of these dragons. But yeah, we just see that there's some cool abilities here that I think if dragons were just defined by their elemental type, this seems like it's more possible to create interesting creatures. So adamantine is known as the hardest metal in the Pathfinder campaign setting. So they have resistance 10 to all physical damage except adamantine. As with animated objects, when you bring them down to half their hit points, their resistance to damage goes away. They can ignore some critical hits. Their breath weapon is a mass of boulders. They have the ability to burrow through the ground, leap out, and attack somebody, all with 3 actions. They can burrow through rock, and they have the ability to throw rocks like giants, and also to swallow creatures whole. They also have tremor sense, and a lot of these abilities remind me of earth elementals. All of these abilities combine to make something very evocative to express this idea of something made of adamantine. Next, I want to cover ghouls. In Pathfinder, they're known as being ravenous, out of control. They want to eat you, and eat you now. However, they have become apparently more civilized. In fact, the description of them being ravenous has been removed in their description. They're more defined by the fact that they eat flesh. And that doesn't preclude being sophisticated, apparently. They are almost like vampires, except vampires drink blood. Ghouls eat flesh. In fact, they probably can get along and use different parts of the same food. We're given a template on how to create your own ghouls out of other creatures. And this is big news, they no longer have the paralysis ability. Instead, they get a number of abilities that include stench that used to be limited to ghasts before. They are all given the grab ability, so they want to hold on to you, and the ability Ghoul Whispers, where if someone is grabbed or restrained, they can whisper into your ear and try to inflict a curse. That curse makes you sickened and make you take void damage and gives you the insatiable urge to eat raw flesh. It doesn't kill you at the highest stage like the current Ghoul Fever does. It makes it so that you must eat raw flesh within 24 hours or die. They also all bury into the ground, so you have a very flavorful, unique type of creature, all of these abilities combined. Next are golems, which are magical constructs that historically in D&D and in Pathfinder are immune to magic, while usually having specific spells that they are vulnerable to. This led to pretty swingy combats where whether a party had access to the right tool had a drastic effect on the difficulty of fighting golems. It also led to some feels bad moments for spellcasters. Well, before we see what they did to replace golem magical immunity, let's look at the renaming of them. They are no longer grouped together under golems in the Monster Core book. They are now scattered throughout the book, and I'm unhappy about that. It's hard to find and remember that the flesh golem is called actually charnel creation, and you have to find them throughout the book. I just want to look at the clay golem, which is now the clay effigy. The clay golem is a very strong creature for its level in the bestiary. They were immune to all magic with a couple of exceptions. They could become quickened, and their fist attacks could give you a cursed wound where if you fail your saving throw, you couldn't heal that damage. Only magic could heal you, and even then, it would have to counteract the curse in order to have any effect. First, what happens to magical immunity? All of these creatures formerly known as golems. By the way, I wish they had kept the name golems. It gave us an easy category to group them under, and I don't think golems is something you can copyright. Anyway, that's my mini rant. But instead of magical immunity, they now have resistance to spells with a number. If the spell has the cold, earth, or water trait, it ignores the resistance. But in general, they resist damage from spells. It's a nice compromise, I think. Spellcasters still feel it, and it doesn't stack with other resistances. It is possible for a clay effigy to be sanctified to a deity, making it holy or unholy, which is cool. All of these creatures formerly known as golems seem to have physical resistance still, just like in the bestiary. Now, instead of the very powerful Cursed Wounds ability from before, we have Effigy's Curse, where if you damage the clay effigy and fail your saving throw, you are cursed if you take any part of its body or something it's guarding. They also have an area of effect attack that does spirit damage and potentially persistent spirit damage. The persistent damage goes away if you move over 60 feet away, in keeping with this theme of guarding a tomb. Next is the Grim Reaper, which is still ridiculous. The designers haven't addressed a lot of the complaints about that. Next is kobolds. Instead of being associated with dragons, which they have traditionally been in Pathfinder and worshipping dragons, they are more flexible, just like our earlier bar guests. They are magically morphic. Their eggs can absorb the traits of more powerful creatures that are nearby. They tend to favor dragons, but it could be other creatures like fiends, elementals, or fae. Although one of their stat blocks still has a trap-making ability, they have lost their bonus to crafting traps for some reason. I'm not sure why. Their description still says that they're good at making traps. This change in their lore explains why the Kobold Dragon Mage has been replaced by the Kobold Cavern Mage. Apparently their eggs were infused with the essence of earth nymphs, and they have appropriate primal spells. Next, we have some non-player character humanoids included in the Monster Core. Many ancestries are covered now and have their own page with a simple low-level stat block. We have a page for dwarves, another for elves. We have a page for halflings. Here is the artwork for the halfling street watcher, which wields a frying pan. We see half-orcs, now called Dromar, grouped under the orcs entry. We also see ancestries that will appear in the Howl of the Wild book coming out soon. We see the sea-dwelling Athamaru here with the Athamaru Hunter stat block, and a centaur herbalist. Lastly, I just talk about wights and wraiths, which in Pathfinder currently are known for the Drain Life ability, where they hit you and make you drained. Well, those have been replaced by something else. For wights, they have a potential curse effect that has its own stages. If you fail your saving throw, you become drained, yes, but at stage 2, you become drained too and do not treat any creatures as allies. So that's an interesting additional effect. And with wraiths, if they're adjacent to a creature, they can wrap their robes around them and expose them to Void's Embrace. It has interesting effects. It doesn't make them just drained with a number. First, they are dazzled in any light. Then they gain life sense 30 feet, but are blinded by any light. At stage 3, same thing, but they now gain void healing. They are healed by effects that heal the undead now. Then next stage, they fall unconscious. Next stage, they die and crumble into ash. Pretty cool. So that's it. This was just a quick tour of a book that many of you should get, and you'll see their stat blocks on Archives of Nethys, probably the day of, if not soon after, March 27th, which is the street date, as of this date, of when the book will get published. Meanwhile, I have done some videos. I've started a series where I cover running monsters in Pathfinder 2e. You guys should check it out. I'll include links in the video description. If there's interest in covering a specific monster from the Monster Core, let me know in the comments. I can't make any promises. I have a very busy schedule these next couple of months. But it might also inform what I cover later in this monster series. So I hope you enjoyed the preview. If you did, like the video and also subscribe to my channel where I cover Pathfinder 2e and other games. Support my Patreon where you get ad-free early access to many of my videos and exclusive content. And if you haven't yet, join my Discord community. We are 5,000 strong now. And there we talk Pathfinder, other games. Also, if you want to play Pathfinder 2e, we have a drop-in, drop-out organized play system for you to join. So that's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. See you next time. Thank you.